All right, so for today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at Bernard Marcus,
Oh,
the
bro.
co-founder of Home Depot.
Right.
And, you sent over a pretty interesting collection of articles and information on him, Wikipedia, some news articles. It seems like you want to understand not just, the typical, bullet points of this guy's life, but, really understand what his deal is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And it's interesting what you've assembled because you've got the classic entrepreneur story,
Right.
but layered with his political stances, and then this huge philanthropic side.
Mhm.
It's not every day you find someone who is so successful in business, but then also so active in these other arenas as well.
Yeah, and it's not even just being active, it's the scale.
Right.
I mean, starting from nothing, building this empire like Home Depot, that's one thing.
Sure.
But then to give most of it away, it's like he's playing real life Tycoon Simulator or something.
Yeah.
Where do you even start with a life like that?
Well, it's often these unexpected juxtapositions that I think are the most revealing. Now, the sources you shared highlight this background of his. Growing up in Newark in a tenement, the youngest of 4 children. So very much the classic rags to riches story.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth thinking about how often that type of background produces these sorts of driven individuals.
Right, like it's almost like a trope at this point.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But there's a reason these tropes emerge.
Right.
And it's like that early environment fuels a certain drive within these people.
And speaking of fuel, did you see that anecdote about him wanting to be a doctor?
I did.
He gets into Harvard Med School but can't afford it.
Oh, wow.
What a sliding doors moment.
Talk about a different path.
Can you imagine Dr. Marcus in an alternate timeline?
Yeah, what if?
Wild.
And yet that financial roadblock that he hit became this detour that led to something else.
It makes you wonder about the nature of success. Is it all about just wanting it bad enough, or is there an element of luck or circumstance mixed in there? How much of it was under his control or not? Right. Well, no, Harvard Med, he goes and becomes a pharmacist instead, which honestly, not too shabby.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, respectable plan B if you ask me.
Yeah.
But then he doesn't even stick with that. He gets the business bug, and he becomes CEO of Handy Dan, and then gets fired.
Oh, really?
You can't make this stuff up.
That's wild.
I know.
So what year is this?
This is late 70s.
Okay.
1978, he's out of a job.
Okay.
And that is where Home Depot comes from.
Oh, wow.
He partners up with Arthur Blank. They bring in Ken Langone as an investor. And boom, 2 stores open in Atlanta in 79.
Wow.
And the rest is history, I guess you could say.
Okay, so this is interesting because, I mean, now we all know what Home Depot is, but back then was that novel.
Totally.
Right.
They were doing something really different. It wasn't just opening another hardware store. The whole
Yeah.
thing was an experience. The warehouse concept, the sheer size of it, offering everything under the sun for DIYers, that was revolutionary at the time.
I see. So they were really tapping into something.
It wasn't just a store. It was like this movement,
Yeah.
People went crazy for it. And blank Marcus Langone, they're all suddenly billionaires.
It does make you wonder. I mean, nowadays we're so used to these big box stores, but back then that must have been a real shift.
Oh, absolutely. And they were smart. They were tapping into this desire that people had for home improvement, empowering the everyday person to do these projects themselves. They were providing the tools literally and figuratively for this whole movement.
It's almost like they were riding a wave they didn't even know was building.
Right, exactly. It makes you wonder how much of success is recognizing that perfect moment, that gap in the market, even if it's not fully formed yet.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's only part of the story with this guy because the Home Depot story is just act 1.
Because then you've got this whole other side to him, the political stuff, the philanthropy. It's like he's got multiple save files going, Like level 1, conquer the business world. Level 2, time for politics and giving back hardcore mode.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you use the word conquer because I think that does seem to be how he's approached things, especially his political activity.
Totally.
The sources you provided, they really highlight his conservative stances and, the amount of money that he's given to various political causes is really something.
Yeah, we're talking millions and millions of dollars donated to the Republican Party specifically.
Right.
Huge support for Donald Trump's campaigns. Even when those calls to boycott Home Depot started popping up, it's like he doubled down. It makes you wonder, did those boycotts actually do anything? On the one hand, maybe it impacted business, but on the other hand, did it even matter to him? Or did it just make him dig in even more?
It's tough to say, and we don't really have the data to say for sure one way or the other.
Right.
But it really illustrates how these things can be so intertwined. His personal beliefs, his business decisions, how the public perceives him. I mean, it's the whole thing, right? The personal is political,
Yeah.
taken to like a whole other level.
Exactly. It's almost like he was willing to take the hits as long as it meant that he could stay true to what he believed in, which I get it, but also, wow,
Right.
talk about putting your money where your mouth is. But then on the complete other side of that, you've got the philanthropy, which is just off the charts. And I'm not talking about, just donating a little here and there. I'm talking about he signed the Giving Pledge.
Oh, wow. So he's pledged to give away the majority of his wealth.
90%. That's what the Giving Pledge is.
I mean, for people who don't know, tell us a little bit more about what that is.
It's basically this commitment that a lot of these ultra-wealthy people are making to dedicate most of their fortunes to charity. It was started by Bill and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett,
Okay.
and more people are signing on every year.
Yeah, so it's not just a passing thought. He's made this public commitment.
Exactly. It's like the billionaire version of I'm not taking it with me.
Hmm.
Right? But even beyond that, it's not just the amount of money. It's all the different causes he supports. I mean, you've got the Marcus Institute, which is doing incredible work with children with developmental disabilities.
Okay.
He's given tons of money to the Georgia Aquarium, which is amazing if you ever get the chance to go.
I've heard good things.
But then there's all this other stuff, too. Medical research, veterans organizations, Jewish causes, the arts. It's all over the place.
So he's not just focused on one or two things.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's across the board. And that's what I find so interesting. It's like you'd think someone with such strong political opinions would maybe just focus on those causes. But he's clearly got this broader vision. It's like, yeah, those political issues matter to me, but so do these humanitarian ones. So does the arts. So does pushing the boundaries of science.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like he's got this big picture in mind.
Yes. And he's putting all these different pieces together like he's building a legacy mosaic or something.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. And on top of it all, his net worth is still going up, even after giving away billions.
Which, I mean, that's a whole other conversation,
That's
right?
crazy.
The amount of money we're talking about here, it's hard to even fathom, but it makes you wonder what kind of impact is that kind of giving actually having
Yeah.
and what's behind it? Is it purely altruistic or are there other factors at play?
Ego. Trying to cement his legacy. Maybe trying to make up for those boycotts.
Exactly. There are all these possibilities, and it could be all of them. We've said it before, and I think it's always worth repeating. The motivations behind these kinds of grand gestures are usually pretty complicated.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And speaking of trying to unpack those motivations, I'm really intrigued by these books he's co-written, Build from Scratch and Kick Up Some Dust.
Oh, yeah. What are those about?
It's basically his life story told in his own words.
Interesting.
I haven't had a chance to dig into them yet, but even just the titles, they've got this real, scrappy, tell it like it is energy.
Yeah, autobiographies can be so interesting because you get to see how someone views themselves and the choices that they've made. You're getting that firsthand account.
It's like getting a peek behind the curtain.
Exactly.
And it's funny. We've been talking about all these different aspects of his life, the business, the politics, the philanthropy, but I still feel like we're missing something. Like, who is this guy at his core? What makes him tick? Maybe those books hold the answer.
Maybe. Maybe that's where we find it.
Or maybe the real Bernard Marcus is the legacy he leaves behind.
Yeah.
It's like we've been looking at all these different sides of him, but what's the big picture? What will people remember him for?
It really is the big question, isn't it? And it's even harder to say with someone like Marcus, who has had such a huge impact on so many different things. I mean, will he be remembered as the Home Depot guy for changing the way we think about retail?
Or will it be the political stuff? All those donations, all that support for candidates, even when it was controversial. Or maybe it'll be the philanthropy, those billions of dollars going to all these different causes. It's almost like he's daring us to try and make sense of it all.
And I think that's what makes these deep dives so interesting. We like easy answers. We want things to fit in neat little boxes.
Yeah.
But Bernard Marcus just doesn't. And maybe that's the legacy right there, that he defied categorization.
It's like he's saying, I built the boxes and then I gave away billions to build an aquarium. But really it makes you think about what it means to have an impact. Does it have to be one thing, or can it be all these different things at once?
It goes back to what we were saying earlier. Trying to really understand a person, especially someone like him, it's impossible, I think. We can look at the facts, we can analyze, but in the end, we're all just interpreting things in our own way.
We're all drawing our own conclusions from the information he's put out there. And maybe that's the whole point, a legacy that makes you think, that forces you to examine your own values.
Maybe. Or maybe he'll just be the guy who sold really good plywood at a discount. Who knows?
Haha, a hardware tycoon with an air of mystery. Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive into the world of Bernard Marcus. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. It's been enlightening, thought-provoking, and yeah, maybe even a little baffling. Because sometimes the best stories are the ones that leave you with more questions than answers.